Okay, it's a little bit after the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and start as people continue to pile in. Just want to welcome everybody to today's panel discussion, navigating the AMR landscape, determining the best solution for your business goals. Before we get started, just wanted to let everybody know this webinar is being recorded. We will send that recording out to everyone that's registered via email within the next couple days. So please keep an eye out for that. We also want to keep this discussion as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A box, and we're going to try and answer them as we go. If we don't get to them during the discussion, there is 15 minutes at the end of the webinar allotted to some Q&A as well. We're also going to throw up a few polls here and there, so feel free to answer those as they pop up during the discussion. So before we get started, I want to quickly dive into the inspiration behind this discussion. So as many of you know, the robotics industry has been growing at a rapid pace. I think anyone that's attended ProMat or Automate could probably attest to the fact that there seems to be 100 new robotics distributors every day. So to say the least, the marketplace seems a little convoluted and crowded, probably confusing to some people at this point. So our goal here is to help navigate you through this complex landscape and hopefully help you make some informed business decisions and maybe figure out if AMR solutions are a good fit for your business. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. First, we have Manthan Pawar. Manthan is currently serving as the product manager for autonomous mobile robotics at Barcodes. He plays a crucial role in coordinating the business plans and go-to-market strategy for robotics initiatives. With a master's degree in robotics from NYU, Manthan brings with him a wealth of experience spanning over 8 years in various domains, including medical robotics, mobile robotics, business development, program management, product management, engineering, and research. At Barcodes, Manthan's primary focus lies in the development and expansion of comprehensive autonomous mobile robotics solutions, as well as integration infrastructure that support them. Next, we have David Lin. David is a mobile robotics expert at Zebra Technologies for the Fetch Robotics portfolio. He has over 18 years of experience working in various programs, management roles in global manufacturing and distribution industries, including e-commerce operations. Currently, he's the product manager at Zebra Robotics Automation, leading strategic initiatives for autonomous mobile robot solutions. And lastly, we have Michael Ray. Mike is the North American Channel Sales Leader for Robotics Automation at Zebra Technologies and has 18 years in warehouse distribution systems and automation. Mike joined Zebra through the Fetch acquisition in August 2021. At Fetch, Mike led partners and alliances after spending 15 years at Manhattan Associates. 14 of those years were in the professional services organization, designing, deploying, and implementing MA's WMS solutions, with the last year spent working with MA's partners and alliances. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Michael, who will serve as our guide and a key contributor in this panel discussion.
Great. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here. Good to be with everyone on the panel as well. I'm first going to open up a question. I think you mentioned ProMat, and I think a lot of people on this call went to ProMat, they went to Automate, they saw what you were talking about, this dearth of robots coming at you, whether it was fixed automation, whether it was the autonomous mobile robots. We'll talk about that a lot here. But so with that, seeing all that, there must be a lot of confusion out there. I'm going to open up to Manthan and ask him a question of, we've seen some consolidation here in the recent couple of months, and with your background and your experience, how does consolidation of this ever-growing industry impact the selection for partners and solutions, and why is it important to choose the right ones?
Yeah, so great question, by the way, Mike. So AMRs, a relatively new technology and new industry. Really started with Kiva Systems and Amazon acquiring Kiva Systems, but what you'll see is all the AMR manufacturers are still in that startup phase, right? Wherein there's not a lot of support infrastructure behind the scenes for deployed robots. And consolidation is playing a key role behind this, whether it's Zebra acquiring Fetch, other acquisitions that are happening in the industry. A few things that is bringing to the table. Number one, once you deploy these robots, the support infrastructure is a key, because again, this is a relatively new technology. It needs constant care, hyper care behind the scenes to make them fully autonomous and fully running. So that's one. And number two is it's becoming a traditional marketplace, right? Wherein we talk about AIDC technology, right? It's a traditional marketplace now. AMRs aren't there, but with the consolidation, I think it's on the way to become a mature marketplace. So yeah, again, it's a crowded place, a lot of consolidation happening. So I always recommend end users to really look at a few things. Number one, the AMRs you're looking at, do they have the support infrastructure even any, right? Well, probably, you'll deploy, hundreds of robots, but then are they going to keep running for the duration of the time period, right? Let's say 3 years and 5 years down the road. And number two is really the installation time. What consolidation brings is a massive deployment and installation and system integration infrastructure, and that's where Barcode Zinc plays, wherein we support Fetch to do the actual installations and deployments and support beyond the sales. So that's what it's this consolidation phase is really about, and the two key component that it's bringing is the installation and support. David, do you want to add anything? What do you see?
Yeah, no, that's great input, Manthan. I agree. I think you're seeing a whole new crop of providers coming and going. I think there's always going to be differences in the technology for each, and the infrastructure safety support is definitely key. I think when you look across, it's important to focus on, your specific workflow and to see if there's a good fit. But once you do, then it's kind of like, okay, how is this supplier or vendor's, history of deployment, into dynamic environments or environments, similar to where you would run, these solutions. And, of course, speaking on behalf of Zebra, also, if you pull back a little bit, you think about the larger ecosystem as well. And what I mean by that is like, okay, so you have robots, that's all great, but then do you have global support, right? Do you have complementary products to work along with that automation? It could be machine vision, it could be cameras, it could be fixed scanners, RFID, a broad product portfolio, again, to make the most of an automation solution. So all things to consider. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Both Dave and Manthan, you both mentioned deployment. So I'll kind of pull on that thread for a second here and dive down a little deeper. And Manthan, what do you see? I mean, there's a lot of confusion and noise out there with the AMR vendors and solutions, but what do you see are the key driving factors for warehouse automation adoption, right? So what are those driving factors you're seeing right now to make people, roll out the pilots, do the actual deployments of these new technologies?
So, yeah, again, fantastic. So, there are really different domains through which you can see this, the lens you can put on, and then see different markets and different time spans of how AMRs are driving, throughput and automation discussions and things like that. So during COVID, a lot of these discussions around warehouse automation and robotics used to be about e-commerce growth and the boom of e-commerce and it needing the drive of increased throughputs. And with increased throughputs, how are you going to cope up with your automation? Can conveyors do that? So during that time frame, a lot of discussions were around ROI and improving ROI. With ROI, everyone started talking about robotics, and then it was really easy. Once you show the ROI, customers would likely to adopt AMRs. But the scenario is completely flipped in last few years, and the ROI discussion has quickly turned into labor shortage discussion, right? It's throughout the industry. At least the US market is that unless somehow millions of workers and in the marketplace, there is a tremendous labor shortage, and the customer discussions are quickly flipping to how do I automate to cope up with the labor shortage, because I don't have 10 forklift drivers, or I don't have X number of warehouse associates. So I need that AMR automation to drive my business further along, right? So and this is through time frame, and then you'll also see some differences in different markets, right? US, as I said, labor shortage is playing a key role, and then probably if you think about Mexico, there's labor consistency issues, right? There's turnover issues. There aren't consistent warehouse associates available, right? You have availability, but then the turnover is really high. So that's what's driving AMR discussions in Mexico. Or you look at a different market completely, which is healthcare backend logistics, right? There is a FDA mandate coming up called DSCSA, which is going to mandate tracking of goods inside supply chain for healthcare, and AMRs can do it really easily. You don't even need any additional infrastructure. So within different time frames and different markets, you're seeing now a different approach as to why AMRs are adding value and how they are being adopted.
That's awesome. Thanks, Manthan. I am going to come back to that ROI thread here in just a few minutes, because I think a lot of people want to know about what is the return and what can they be expecting and what to look for and what inputs and factors contribute to that. But first, I want to ask Dave a question with his expertise in the technology itself, and then with the hardware and the software. Dave, in what ways do you see the AMRs bringing flexibility to not only warehouse operations but to the manufacturing floor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that's one of the significant advantages with the mobile robotics versus fixed or legacy equipment, for sure. Certainly over the traditional manual movement as well. But if you take a look at a warehouse or a manufacturing shop floor, most of the material is unidirectional as far as the movement, right? You have your value stream when you look across what you're doing in the warehouse, right? You have storage, you have your production, assembly, testing, and pack out. But as you transport those goods, right, from raw into work in progress or WIP and into finished goods, generally you're working with a single directional workflow. Well, the flexibility that the AMRs provide is that they can move in any direction. So you start thinking about how that opens up your operation from a process improvement standpoint, or lean manufacturing and less waste, right? So less idle time, higher utilization of not just the robotics, but your very valuable assembly technicians and production staff as well. So what that means is you can transport material forward and backward. If you're building a product and going through a sub assembly and assembly, if there's production fallout, you can return those goods over to a troubleshooting area, for example, or QA. So there's a lot of flexibility in the actual physical movement of goods within the floor in a warehouse. But you also have the ability to deploy very quickly, okay, as Manthan mentioned, but you can, once you deploy, it's not fixed, right? Like for example, like a conveyor or a production line, you can deploy today and then modify for later as your needs change or grow. You can even have different workflows for your second shift, for example. So you really start to maximize the value of something like this and change the way you think about how your workflows are deployed on your floor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the flexibility is truly endless. As you say, you could have different workflows for different shifts. You could have different, robots, right? Different form factors of the robots doing different workflows on the same shift, going in different areas without that bolt in the floor and that fixed automation and what comes with all that to be able to move it around should you want to change your design in the future. So that's a definite advantage I see. Manthan, another question for you. We talked about the higher level consolidation of the industry and why it's always good to go with a partner you trust and be around for the long haul and what some of those driving factors of adoption. But with you and the Barcodes team, and your team that you guys have there, how do you help businesses identify the right AMR solution, and what are some of the key factors to consider? And you mentioned this before, to consider successful deployment, because it's one thing to get the solution right, but to execute and deploy is obviously the end goal, to make that right. So again, I kind of talked over it, but how can business help business identify the right AMR solution and some key factors to consider to ensure that successful deployment?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that drive a successful deployment, successful design of a solution. And I always talk about, instead of talking about, robots or robot names, let's talk about workflows, right? Is it end of line? Is it each picking? Is it case picking? Or is it, pallet transport ground to ground? So we, identifying the right processes is really important. So and again, as this industry gets mature, we see that clear shift. And instead of talking about robots, and you see that exact same scenario with let's say another mature industry, which is robotic arms, right? So you talk about palletization, depalletization, that's a workflow. So we always now, have started to see that shift, which is identifying the right workflow and the ROI behind it. Is that going to give you ROI? There are really 4 factors that I see as an ROI input, wherein it's going to give you the best ROI possible if you have these 4 key requirements. Which is number 1, if you are running multiple shifts. Single shift, it's great. AMRs do work. We deploy AMRs for single shift. But what's better? More than 1 shift, because robots don't stop working in only 1 shift, right? So probably you have 3 shifts, let's say, right? Robots will work 24/7, right? Non-stop. So you'll see the highest return. That's number 1, more than 1 shift. Number 2 is number of movements you're making, whether it is eaches, cases, or pallets, right? If you're moving material a lot from point A to B to C, and the frequency is high, you're going to see really easy ROI with AMRs. And it's a no-brainer for our customers. Number 3 I see is travel distance. I come across customers wherein they're moving pallets for thousands of feet in a warehouse, ground to ground, which is a complete waste of a forklift driver. We could have an AMR doing that transport from point A to point B. So if you have long travel distances and probably a forklift driver or a manual associate is actually transferring carts or walking that distance, robots is the answer. And the fourth one I'll say is the fully burden ring. Well, this is in some cases not a deal breaker. Or you'll see some differences in, like, let's say, coast to coast, California being the highest paid warehouse associate salary. AMRs make no-brainer ROI. So these are like 4 factors I always ask customers, do you have these? This is the best use case for you. Number of shifts, frequency of movements, travel distance, and the fourth one, which is the fully burdened rate. Fully burdened.
Yeah, those are fantastic points to consider. Little anecdotal, you mentioned the robots working 24 hours. There's a Zebra customer, and Dave and I are very familiar with it. And they deployed the Fetch robotic system about 2 years ago. And when they set their schedule up, they actually didn't set up holidays. So the first holiday they came across was Thanksgiving, and on their on Thanksgiving, they got a call from the alarm system because the robots had woken up and just started working on Thanksgiving morning. So they do work, all day, every day, if you will let them, for sure.
And
anyway.
One thing you start seeing is you suddenly start seeing higher throughput, which then makes realization, oh, I could be doing much more with my existing warehouse and manufacturing facility.
Yeah,
I could be handling, thousands of let's say pallets per hour, or however that is your key KPI for throughput. And then that really drives the business for customers. So
yeah, you definitely can, get that flywheel going with the higher throughput. And you mentioned some great inputs there on the ROI. And I was wondering, Dave, if you have any other maybe soft, we'll call it soft costs as we talk about it sometimes, that you've seen that have really, put the technology over the edge as far as, yes, we want to do it. What are some of those soft costs to consider as well?
Yeah, good question, Mike. So, as we, get feedback from customers across, more and more deployments, we do see some themes there. I think a lot of it has to do with your existing labor force. And, I think retention, for example, is one. And, I always, tell the story, and we would go back to one of our customers and do some interviews, across the board, just to get feedback and give that back to our team on how our solutions are operating. And we had asked one of the warehouse associates that has been working closely with AMRs for a while, and we just kind of asked casually, what do you like best about these robots, and we were expecting something like, oh, it's automating this or automating that, and it's moving this, and I don't have to do it or something. But his response was actually, well, we all get to go home earlier, and so it painted this picture of again, what Manthan mentioned earlier. There's definitely a shortage, and that means your existing staff has to carry that burden now. The implications of overtime and employee burnout and those kinds of things. So as we see greater adoption, sometimes customers and associates, they're tentative at first with the whole robotics, but at the end, they end up being very thankful for it. Again, from the soft cost of retention, and this employee even mentioned that it was a great experience getting to work with this new technology, right? So I think robotics offers this kind of upskilling of working with the latest thing, instead of like, okay, well, I just move this material for miles and miles a day, for example. Just quickly, Mike, I think I think empowering your existing labor, and I think the whole warehouse space, the floor space aspect of it, it was sort of perhaps a fringe benefit that maybe no one really considered in the beginning with these deployments. But as our customers started to replace fixed motorized conveyor with AMRs. Wow, it just opened up again, a whole new world for them, because they could, once they rip that out, they could replace it with, for example, high density storage. And now as a result, their capacity is like increased significantly now. Finding space is always the hardest thing, I think, in a manufacturing shop floor or a warehouse. And I think this is definitely another soft benefit, another fringe benefit with working with mobile robotics.
I think we also came across a customer wherein we saw improvements in noise inside a warehouse.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's those impacts as well, right? So you've got the one customer I think Matt was talking about had a very loud, noisy conveyor system, and so the overall job satisfaction went up just because of the ambient
Correct.
noise went down, and people could actually hear themselves not only talk to each other but think throughout their day during their job. So there are these aspects of the product that help make people's jobs more enjoyable, which I think it's not necessarily factored in our hard cost of the ROI, but it's something definitely to consider. I would say for sure, something to not just throw by the wayside.
Yeah.
Great example. Yeah.
And speaking on ROI again, Manthan, because I told you as we come back to it, we've been talking about this for a minute. I think a lot of people want to know, when you and the Barcodes team are out there, evaluating the possibilities, potentials for these solutions. Can you provide any insights onto a typical ROI that the businesses can expect from implementing AMRs? I know things are, every implementation is different, every workflow is different and facility, but what have you guys seen in your experience?
Yeah, so I can take this one and then, David, chime in as you like. So, want to take in this two ways. Number one, the CapEx versus RAS has been booming, this discussion throughout the industry. But typical ROI of these systems used to be a couple of years. And now it's less than 1 year for sure, typically with AMR system. And this ROI gets even further shorter with robot as a service. Okay. And here are a few things why. So you would typically, for AGV systems and conveyor systems, you would pay upfront millions of dollars for project, right? And I've had a customer that said, we want to deploy AGVs. We signed a PO, $10 million. AGVs, the lead time is 2 years, deployment time is 1 year. And this is completely opposite scenario on a technology like touch robotics and AMRs, right? Wherein the lead times are really short. We deploy quickly within a week time frame, and quickly turn around and go live for the project. But the other factor with RAS is no upfront cost, right? Except installation and deployment and integration. This is no upfront cost, and everything is embedded into the robot as a service, right? So your existing cost structure under OPEX, which you pay for your warehouse associates salary and your other OPEX costs, it can be easily implemented into the similar scenario for robotics, right? So you don't need bigger approvals on projects. All you do is we do a ROI calculation for you, and say, guys, this is 10 robot system. It's going to give you this much saving yearly, and just implement into your existing OPEX, right? So really easy with adoption of robot as a service. And I always say there's a lot of customers demanding CapEx, which we both do, which Zebra and Barcodes offer CapEx for customers that look for CapEx. But an easy way to think about this is think about it in a software as a service type of approach, because hardware is great, robot hardware is amazing, right? But it's really the software behind it that makes it autonomous, right? And navigate in your warehouse. and software has a lot more value than the hardware itself, right? So this software that the robot you're buying, you're actually buying SaaS, and this SaaS gets updated every month and every year with software updates to make robots more efficient, more faster. Probably the robot you have will do 10 more tasks and 10 more workflows in the future, right? So it's really software updates that matters the most with a new technology like this. So think of it as software as a service, and that makes it easy for a lot of customers for AMR adoption.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up those two distinctions about the two different ways to go about acquiring, purchasing these types of solutions. So I'll ask you, Dave. What is Zebra's RAS, robot as a service? How does that compare to others, and what is all included in that RAS? What does the customer get for that as a service model?
Yeah, great question. So, it's structured around a monthly fee, right? And then not only are you getting the hardware and the software piece, as Manthan just mentioned, you get all the upgrades and developments over the air as we add new features, as we add new functionality, improvements to workflows, collaborative tools, analytics, the whole package. Those come along, with the RAS deal. But the other piece, Mike, is the maintenance, right? And so the RAS is always going to be is all inclusive. So you're not going to worry about, for example, any type of preventative or responsive maintenance of spare parts. So these robots already require very little maintenance, but we do include that as part of the RAS contract. So again, you're all in on one monthly cost. So it just makes it very easy. And I just to add to what Manthan said, I think because of that, the way that RAS is structured, and because that we're cloud enabled, and makes we can deploy very quickly. Some of the customers that we work with, we're up and running in literally 3 days, right? You're up and running. So when you think about ROI, it's the very powerful piece of it is this time to value. I always kind of look back to like the conveyor piece, right? That equipment could be weeks out, 16, 18, 20 weeks. I don't know how the lead times look now as far as the supply chain, but if you're up in 3 days with AMRs, you probably would have had many iterations and many modifications of your workflow to refine and optimize before you even get that fixed infrastructure in the door. You know what I mean? So you can see that time to value much quicker with this combination of RAS and cloud deployment.
And I'll touch on something that I think both you guys have mentioned is about the flexibility and the ways that we can add additional robots into an operation, right? So as you mentioned with fixed conveyor and automation, in the past, I've worked with different providers and vendors in that, and basically you have to build that out for 5 years in the future. What does your future look like? And you're building that for that capacity that you don't yet have, but you may have in the future. With the robots as a service, you can build as you grow. You can add to the robots, right? So you don't have to necessarily build the church for Easter Sunday, as they say. You can work your way to that eventual outcome, hopefully. So
that's a great point. Yeah,
I that's one thing I think that's one of the major advantages that I always see, is that you can grow into them. You don't have to buy a fleet of 100. You can start with 5 or 10, and as your business grows, you can grow into adding more, and even different types. So yeah, but I want to ask one thing of Manthan on this. This is the last question I'll ask about the RAS. What are you seeing as your typical time duration terms on these types of contracts? Or these, what is the Barcodes team seeing?
Yeah, we're pretty flexible towards customers, but the typical ask for us is definitely 3 to 5 years. And that's where a lot of these customers see a lot of value in something like this. being proven in 3 to 5 years. And in next 5 years, the technology will be somewhere else. Even the hardware will be somewhere else. I talked about software updates, but let's say even the hardware is updated. The existing hardware is no longer, capable of things that will be needed to do in the next 5 years. You easily remove the existing robots and deploy new robots. And that's the beauty of robot as a service, and versus why not to buy these equipments outright, right? So I don't know, David, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, no, I think, for sure. I think that's what we're seeing and across the board with our customers and different experiences. I mean, it's I think it becomes, it goes back to what you said, Manthan. I think it's about the workflows, right? I think you look at key metrics and there's you're always going to look for or strive for a specific outcome. Okay, for example, like a UPH or something like that. But I just, we feel like with the solution, you look at your operation holistically and then how you can benefit moving forward.
Sure, I think we've got the CapEx and RAS wrapped up in a pretty little bow right there.
Yeah.
We'll go on to something that I know that Dave, we've talked about, and the Barcodes team definitely has talked about with their customers about these solutions, right? So Dave, Zebra and Fetch producing, manufacturing these systems, are there any ethical or safety considerations associated with the use of mobile robots, right? I mean, are they safe, right? That's the first question I know a lot of people ask. And then how do manufacturers like Zebra Fetch address them in design and the design process, first off, and then within the implementation itself?
So that's a really interesting question, Mike. So at the Automate show just a couple months ago, we had the UL team, stop by the booth, and it's starting to get noticed more, in these discussions with regulatory, and stuff like that, especially because, as you mentioned, the safety aspect of it. They are designed to work closely with humans and in and around dynamic environments. You got pallet jacks, you got people driving forklifts and all kinds of stuff. So I've seen, golf carts running through there, and so it's all these obstacles that you do have to consider. And again, they are designed to work in that environment. They're not closed off or behind a fence, right? Like a large robot arm or even some of the goods to person type systems. So to answer your question, well, on the Fetch side, I think safety has always been at the forefront. We actually design our parameters around a safety standard, and we have been leveraging the ANSI RIA, and it's called R1508, is the latest safety conformance that was released a little while ago that covers industrial mobile robotics and how they should behave and operate around people. It considers the mobile aspect of the robot and the technology, how it can replan. And I think we finally caught up to the standards have finally caught up to the technology because we've been on the AGV standard for so long, and it just doesn't apply anymore. It's you're not going to be able to cover all the bases with just the AGV standard. So we bake that in, Mike, with all our hardware. And the interesting thing with our stuff is, I'll just mention real quickly, is think of the AMR as an entire system, right? The audience is familiar with the autonomous mobile robot base with a top module, right? And Zebra designs everything as a whole. So you have the top module compatible with the base module, but everything is certified as one whole system. And I think that's an important aspect of it. right, as you consider, risk assessments and safety and regulatory and all that.
100%. Just last question here, and Mantham, if you want to expound upon that, how you and the barcodes team, or your customers asking you about this, and then how do you respond to these questions about AMR technology? Is it safe? Is it something that we should be implementing? Is this something that's going to hurt my workforce, or injure and impact?
Yeah. So in our process, really, barcodes team goes on site to do a site evaluation, really thorough site evaluation, whether it's the aisle widths, whether it is Wi-Fi, and breaking the signals and stuff like that, covering on the entirety of the warehouse, or whether it is inclinations and ramps and wet surfaces. Is it safe to navigate for an AMR? So our solutions engineering team is really well equipped to do these surveys, and we always do that before even starting to design a full-blown solution for our customers, right? Because safety for us is high, and then automation. So we always keep in mind that it's always going to be safe to deploy these AMRs, and they're going to work 5 years down the road alongside foot traffic, alongside forklift traffic, right? But I've seen, deployed fetch AMRs, and it really takes for customers to see it in person, how safe they are. And that's why we even visit other customer sites where fetch is deployed, or even demo centers, right, where fetch has been deployed. So it takes time, right? But it's the overall consolidation in the AMR industry education is getting there to understand how AMR is safer. Right?
Fantastic. I think it's definitely on top of people's minds. They're thinking about safety, right? It's something that everyone thinks about and needs to be thinking about. But as these become more ubiquitous throughout, facilities everywhere. Now, I don't know, Brendan, do we have any?
Yeah, quickly, I wanted to hop in here quick, and we can switch over to the Q&A. We've had a couple questions come in. If you haven't submitted any already, please feel free. You can do it through the chat or the Q&A box. One of the questions I saw come up, and we may have covered this a little bit, but do we have customers reported any noticeable difference in employee retention after deploying robots? And what are the effects that have been observed?
Yeah, I don't.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. We did talk about this earlier. Maybe just quickly, mention again. I mean, I think the answer is yes. We are seeing that because we know some of these operations, it's so tough to find people, and then it's so competitive for the existing labor that any little edge can provide you an advantage as far as the retention is concerned. But specifically, the results have been, well, look, I'm walking so much less, and now I can redirect my time to higher value tasks. For example, opens up other opportunities. So instead of transporting, moving material manually, maybe now I'm in charge of inventory management, for example, and that opens up a different career path, I think, for associates. Also, just working with robotics so closely in general, they really gain a valuable experience. Something to add to the resume as well. So I think it does have a significant improvement. I mean, I think it also does come back to that burnout. We've walked through some of these facilities where it's just very tough, and you all know those environments. It can be extremely hot, it can be extremely cold. It's not the best place to be, but if you have a little bit of help, it does make a difference. It does make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you give associates a choice, of working with, well, let's say 2 warehouses, one with robots and one without. I think it's clear choice wherein I don't have to walk. And it's really the shift in the job roles, right? Wherein you'll start seeing more of maintenance and supervisory roles versus walking long distances, right? Or whether it is watch the entire automation remotely and make sure it's functioning right. So right, the role changes completely, and with a little unknown training, right? So and obviously you're going to start seeing a lot of upskilling and higher retention rate.
Yeah, if I could add
Thank you.
one thing too, real quick on that note. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
It actually, what I've seen and what we've observed with some of our customers, and one in particular, is it actually increases the labor pool that can come and work at your facility. Right now, I don't have to maybe have someone walk that 10 miles a day. I can walk a mile a day and do the same job. It's an accessibility issue. I think we have a customer that is employs a lot of visually impaired people, and they use the robots for that very reason, right? So the robots are bringing goods and services, so it's actually increased the labor pool for them. So I think that it does take some change management to get it right. You can't just deploy them and say, here you go. There's definitely some change management that has to happen. But if you have the right workflow, I think the people really embrace the robots from what I've seen. I've yet to find a facility that we've deployed them in where people just don't like them and don't want to be around them.
Thanks, guys. Here's another one that came in. What's the major difference between AMRs and AGVs?
David, go ahead.
Maybe Manthan, do you want to take that one?
I'll take it. This is my favorite question. So, well, AGVs, whether it's line following robot or whatever their fixed infrastructure is, right? AGVs require fixed infrastructure so that they can navigate well, right? And it's not very flexible compared to AMRs. But where AMRs play is you don't need to change your warehouse. You don't need to change your workflows, or you don't need to change your layout. It can be just as easy as just throwing in robots, right? So that because they're not gonna navigate themselves with any obstacles, any avoid, humans or traffic or foot traffic or forklift traffic. So that's the biggest difference in my opinion, right? AGVs versus AMRs. AMRs are a lot more flexible and can be easily changed into different workflows. Can do multiple different workflows in a single shift or in multiple shifts, which AGVs are only built for a particular workflow. So that's in my opinion biggest difference. David, what do you want to say?
Yeah. No, that's a great one. Yeah, I love this question as well. And the way I kind of I describe it sometimes is so the AGV it moves on a fixed path. So it's similar to like just getting on a train and then going stop to stop. But an AMR is dynamic and replans. So that's basically like calling an Uber, right? I don't have to go from this stop to this stop. It's on demand, first of all, right? Because I can request this pickup and delivery anywhere and to go to anywhere in my facility. So again, so you have much more flexibility. You're not tied to just following a single path, around your facility. And that is one of the key differences. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Got a couple more here. We talked on this just a little bit, I think, but how do you envision the future of mobile robotics? What are some specific technologies that might drive further advancement?
Yeah, again, second favorite question. All right, so I'll take this one and then you take a stab, David or Mike. And I think a lot of you who visited ProMat saw some really unique solutions at ProMat, such as humanoids and then drones and a lot of other solutions. So I think the aim of this industry is, as we all know, which started with Amazon, and now the full adoption of automation and lights off, wherein no worker inside, and it's all fully driven by robots and automation, right? That's definitely is the end goal. And there is a lot of investment being made in AI and robotics right now, especially in as we hear humanoid. And I have my takes on humanoid and where it's going. But what you'll see right now for general purpose robots is that the ROI isn't there for a technology like humanoids. Because let's take an example. In your warehouse, you'll have 10 different workflows, and the goal of something like humanoid is to do all those 10 things together, right? And be flexible. But however, the technology itself is so expensive today that the ROI isn't going to be there for next, whatever, 10, 15 years. And in our view, at least we see is you will have 10 different smaller robots to do 10 different applications and workflows. And that's going to drive the biggest ROI for you. And that's where Fetch, Zebra, and Barcodes is focused on. How do we conceptualize and deploy robots for different applications? And how can they work all together? So interoperability, in our opinion, is the next big chapter for us. How can these different robots all work together under single platform? Right. So I think this is where the industry is going. Probably in 20, 30 years, yes, humanoid may be the answer. But today, as we stand for next 20 years, it's going to be individualized workflows and individual robots that will come together to form an entire warehouse automation. In my opinion, humanoids are a little overkill. David, what do you want to say?
Yeah, no. Thanks for that. That take. I was going to say, what we're working on, at Zebra now, as far as the capabilities and technologies is, we're injecting social behaviors into these robots. And so what does that mean? That's so basically it's enabling a robot to behave more like a human. Okay, so and the impact to the users are, for example, if you are in the warehouse and walking down an aisle, you would expect the robot to move or adhere to, for example, the rules of the road. As we know, just like you're walking down a sidewalk, for example, right? You in the US will bias to the right. Okay, and so little things like that that helps basically give the associates a better perception of how this robot's going to behave, and not that it's just running around like crazy. Okay, so we're far past like the Roombas of the world, where it's just like bumping into something and just moving, right? So but it does have implications with safety, as Mike mentioned earlier, but also efficiency. Right. So if you're adhering to or biasing towards a certain side of the aisle, then you're not surprised, right? You're not surprised, especially if you're driving a forklift. You don't want that robot crossing the street or crossing that aisle right in front of you, for example. So those types of technology and behaviors. And the other piece is what you mentioned, and then the machine learning piece. At Zebra, we're starting to leverage that more. We have the benefit of being cloud-based, so we can process a lot of do a lot of the compute in the cloud. And so what we use machine learning for are things like, again, safety related, for example, like a forklift detection, those types of things. Because not only do you want to navigate around something like a forklift, and you want to be very careful around it, but but there's the piece of there's the vertical piece. If it's lifting it, does it have its tines up or down, or is it lifting a load, or is it not? You know, can I move? Can the robot move to a safe area around there? So again, it's all these sort of considerations. We talked earlier about the safety piece, but I think these technologies are definitely driving you know, better and better operations and the interoperability for sure. You know, I think in the near future, you will have robots working with other robots in a warehouse. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's all the questions that I see coming in here. So I think we can just about wrap it up. Thanks again, everybody, for joining. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to us. You can email us at robotics@barcodesinc.com, visit our website at www.barcodesinc.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Zebra, and our panelists for hopping on. It was a really engaging discussion, and we are excited to continue to do more in the future.